My son gave me a choice, either serve his wife or leave. I smiled, grabbed my bag. I'm Mabel Johnson, 67 years old, and my life changed completely 5 years ago when my beloved husband, Frank, passed away. When I sold our family home to move in with my son, Andrew, I thought I was starting a new chapter filled with family closeness and precious time with my grandchildren. Instead, I found myself trapped in a power struggle with my daughter-in-law, Lisa, that I never saw coming. The morning Andrew gave me that ultimatum was the day something inside me finally broke free. If you're watching this video, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to make a difficult family decision that changed everything. After 35 years, teaching third graders at Lincoln Elementary retirement had been a welcome change of pace for Frank and me. We'd planned to travel volunteer and spend more time with our son Andrew and his growing family. Frank had worked as an accountant, and between our pensions and modest savings, we had enough for a comfortable retirement in the house we'd paid off 20 years earlier. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, Frank went for his daily walk and never came home. A massive heart attack took him instantly on the trail by the creek where we used to picnic when Andrew was small. The neighbors who found him said he looked peaceful, but that brought me little comfort in those first dark months alone. Our 3-bedroom ranch house suddenly felt cavernous without Frank's booming laugh and constant tinkering. Every corner held a memory that stabbed me with fresh grief. The garden he'd lovingly tended withered as I couldn't bring myself to care for his prized tomato plants. Even simple tasks like taking out the trash or changing light bulbs became painful reminders that I was now solely responsible for everything. Andrew visited often during that first year, driving the 30 minutes from his suburban home with Lisa and their children Zach and Emma, who were 7 and 5 at the time. I treasured those Sunday afternoon visits when the house would briefly fill with the chaos of family life again. "Mom, I hate seeing you rattling around in this big house all by yourself," Andrew said one Sunday as we watched the children play in the backyard. "Have you thought about downsizing, maybe moving closer to us?" I had considered it, but the thought of sorting through 40 years of memories felt overwhelming. Yet I couldn't deny the loneliness was taking a toll. The neighborhood had changed too. Most of our old friends had either moved to be near their own children or into retirement communities. Actually, Andrew continued, leaning forward with excitement, "Lisa and I were talking. What if you sold this place and came to live with us? We have that finished basement with the extra bathroom. It would be perfect as your own little apartment." The idea took root immediately. Being close to my only child and getting to see my grandchildren grow up day by day instead of just on weekends, it sounded like the perfect solution to the emptiness that had settled over my life. "We could help each other out," Andrew explained. "You'd have your family around you, and you could maybe help with the kids sometimes when we're both working late. Lisa's been stressed about their after-school schedules." It seemed like a win-win situation. I could be useful again, surrounded by family while maintaining some independence in their basement apartment. Andrew and Lisa had purchased their 2-story colonial just 2 years earlier, and I knew they were still stretching to make the mortgage payments. I could help them financially while solving my own loneliness problem. The decision came quickly after that conversation. I listed the house with a realtor who had helped several other teachers downsize. The market was hot, and within 6 weeks, I had accepted an offer well above asking price. Most of our furniture wouldn't fit in my new space, so I held an estate sale, keeping only the most precious pieces. Frank's leather recliner, our wedding photo albums, the handmade quilt from his mother. Everything else found new homes. Moving day was bittersweet. Leaving the house where we'd raised Andrew and built our life together felt like leaving part of Frank behind. But as my son helped carry the last box to the moving truck, I felt a flutter of excitement too. A new chapter was beginning, one filled with bedtime stories for my grandchildren and family dinners around a table that wouldn't feel too empty. The welcome at Andrew and Lisa's home was everything I could have hoped for. They'd painted the basement space in cheerful yellow tones and added curtains to make it homier. Emma had made a construction paper sign for my door that read, "Grandma's Place," with wobbly letters and heart stickers. Zach proudly showed me how he'd arranged my books on the built-in shelves. "We're so happy to have you here, Mabel," Lisa said, hugging me as we finished setting up my bedroom. She was a pretty woman in her late 30s with shoulder-length brown hair and an energetic personality. She worked as a pharmaceutical sales rep, a job that kept her busy with frequent client dinners and occasional travel. Those first few weeks felt like a honeymoon phase. I slipped into their family routines, joining them for dinners, helping with homework, and discovering the joy of being a daily presence in my grandchildren's lives. The sale of my house had left me with a substantial sum, and I insisted on contributing to the household expenses. In fact, I gave Andrew a significant amount to put toward their mortgage principal as thanks for opening their home to me. "Mom, that's too generous," Andrew had protested, but I could see the relief in his eyes. Like many families in their prime earning years, they were financially stretched between mortgage car payments and trying to save for college funds. "I was going to use it to buy a condo anyway," I told him. "This is my home now, too. I want to contribute." It felt good to be needed and to be part of a bustling household again. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, I would often sit with Andrew and Lisa in their family room, sharing a glass of wine and catching up on their days. They seemed genuinely interested in my stories about the neighborhood or my lunch outings with former teaching colleagues. I found a rhythm in this new life, careful to give the family their private time while also becoming an integral part of their household. When Lisa mentioned feeling overwhelmed by the laundry, I happily took over that chore. When Andrew complained about the lawn maintenance, I found a reliable service and paid for it myself as my contribution. I felt useful, valued, and most importantly, no longer alone. If only that feeling had lasted. The first hint that things weren't going to remain so idyllic came about 2 months after I moved in. I had prepared a pot roast for dinner, an old family recipe that had always been Andrew's favorite as a boy. I used the same vegetables, the same seasonings, even the same heavy cast iron Dutch oven that had been a wedding gift from Frank's mother. "This is a little different from how I usually make it," Lisa commented after taking her first bite. Her tone was light, but I caught the slight furrow of her brow. "I usually go lighter on the salt and add rosemary instead of thyme." It seemed a small thing, hardly worth noting, but I found myself feeling deflated. "I'm sorry. I should have asked how you prefer it." No, it's fine," Lisa said quickly, though she ate very little of her portion. "It's nice having someone else cook for a change." After that, I began to notice more moments of friction, small but accumulating like tiny paper cuts. Lisa rearranged the dishes I'd put away, explaining her system for organizing the cabinets. When I did laundry, she pointed out that she preferred the towels folded in thirds, not halves. When I picked up the children from school and gave them cookies as a snack, she mentioned they were trying to cut back on sugar. None of these corrections was delivered unkindly, but their cumulative effect was to make me feel increasingly like a guest who wasn't quite following the house rules rather than a family member who belonged. "Maybe I should just let you handle the cooking," I suggested one evening after Lisa had added several ingredients to a casserole I was preparing. "You obviously have your own way of doing things." "That's silly, Mabel," she said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I appreciate the help, it's just that the family is used to certain flavors." The family, not our family or your family too, just the family. The distinction wasn't lost on me. Andrew, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the growing tension. He worked long hours at his accounting firm, often coming home just in time for dinner, grateful for whatever was on the table and happy to see his mother and wife seemingly coexisting peacefully. When I tried to bring up some of my concerns to him privately, he brushed them aside. "Lisa's just particular about some things, Mom. You know how she is. She appreciates everything you do, really." But I was beginning to wonder if that was true. Increasingly, I found myself retreating to my basement space in the evenings, citing fatigue or a good book as an excuse when in reality, I was simply trying to reduce potential conflicts by making myself less visible. The dynamic with the grandchildren began to shift too. Initially, Lisa had been grateful for my help with school pickups and after-school supervision, but gradually she began to micromanage these interactions as well. "We're trying to establish consistent discipline," she explained, when I allowed Zach to play video games before finishing his homework. "It confuses the kids when the rules change depending on who's watching them." I understood the principle, but it felt like a rebuke nonetheless. Soon, I noticed the children themselves becoming confused about my role. When Emma asked me for permission to have a friend over and I said yes, Lisa later countermanded the decision, explaining they had family plans I hadn't been told about. "Just check with me or Daddy first, sweetie," she told Emma within my hearing. "Grandma doesn't always know our schedule." Increasingly, I felt like an outsider looking in on family life rather than a participant. I began spending more time in my room, emerging primarily when specifically asked to help with something or for shared meals. I joined a book club at the local library to give myself a regular reason to leave the house. I volunteered one morning a week at the elementary school, reading to kindergartners, which nourished my teacher's soul, but the underlying tension continued to build. Lisa began leaving notes about household tasks. Dishwasher needs emptying or children's lunches need to be packed would appear on the kitchen counter, never addressed to me specifically, but clearly intended for my eyes. Andrew, when home, would collapse into exhaustion, clearly relieved when his mother and wife maintained a surface civility. If he noticed the growing coldness between us, he chose not to address it, and I, not wanting to put him in the middle, stopped trying to discuss it with him. 6 months into my new living arrangement, I realized with a sinking heart that I had gone from being a welcome addition to the household to something else entirely. Something that felt uncomfortably like an unpaid domestic worker who was expected to be grateful for room and board. The warm family dinners where we all shared stories about our days had dwindled to functional meals where the conversation primarily excluded me. One particularly telling incident occurred when I entered the kitchen one morning to find Lisa instructing Emma on how to make pancakes. "Your grandmother doesn't make them the way we like them," she was saying, not realizing I was within earshot. "She uses too much vanilla." Emma caught sight of me, and her eyes widened in alarm. Lisa turned her smile tight when she saw me. "Oh, Mabel, just showing Emma our special family recipe." I nodded and retreated a lump in my throat. Too much vanilla, too much salt in the pot roast. Too present in their lives, apparently, despite feeling increasingly invisible. That afternoon, I took myself to a movie alone, sitting in the dark theater and wondering how things had gone so wrong so quickly. I thought about my cozy basement space decorated with my remaining treasures from the home I'd shared with Frank. It was comfortable, but increasingly felt like a place I was retreating to rather than living in. "Frank," I whispered that night into my pillow, "I think I've made a terrible mistake." But there was no going back. My house was sold, much of my furniture and belongings were gone, and a significant chunk of my savings had been given to Andrew to reduce their mortgage. I was in many ways trapped. As the months passed, the tension in the house grew thicker like storm clouds gathering before a downpour. Lisa's comments became more direct, less couched in polite suggestions. What had begun as gentle redirections about household preferences evolved into open criticism. "The children's white clothes are looking gray," she remarked one afternoon, dropping a basket of laundry in my room. "You need to use the special detergent for whites. I've bought some and left it by the machine." It wasn't just the criticism that stung, but the assumption that laundry had become exclusively my domain and expectation rather than a contribution I chose to make. Similarly, childcare shifted from being a joy and occasional help to an assumed responsibility. "I need you to take Zach to his dentist appointment Thursday," Lisa informed me, not asking but telling, "and Emma has a play date after school on Wednesday that you'll need to drive her to." When I mentioned I had my book club on Wednesday afternoons, Lisa's face tightened. "Well, I have a client meeting I can't reschedule. Family has to come first, Mabel." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. Family first indeed, but I was increasingly uncertain of my place in this family hierarchy. Andrew's role in this shifting dynamic was perhaps the most painful aspect. My son, who had once been so eager to have me join their household, now seemed to avoid being alone with me. He came home later, often eating reheated dinner while checking emails. When I tried to engage him in conversation about how things were going, he would smile tiredly and say everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. I was spending more time alone in my basement room than with the family. The grandchildren, picking up on the tension, became less likely to seek me out. Zach, now 12, was absorbed in his own social world of sports and video games. 10-year-old Emma, once so excited to bake cookies with me, now checked with her mother first before accepting my invitations. The breaking point came during a dinner party Lisa hosted for several couples from her work. I had spent the afternoon helping prepare appetizers and setting the dining room table with Lisa's grandmother's china. When guests arrived, I made myself useful, refilling wine glasses and bringing out food. "Mabel is such a help around the house," Lisa told one of her colleagues as I placed a tray of stuffed mushrooms on the coffee table. We're so lucky to have her, like having a live-in nanny and housekeeper rolled into one." The woman laughed politely, but I felt my face flush with humiliation. Is that how Lisa saw me? Not as family, but as unpaid household staff? I looked to Andrew, hoping he might correct this characterization, but he was deep in conversation with another guest and either hadn't heard or chose to ignore it. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and I was helping clean up despite my exhaustion, I tried to address it with Lisa. That comment about me being like a nanny and housekeeper, I began carefully. It made me uncomfortable. Lisa looked surprised. Why? It was a compliment. You are incredibly helpful, and we appreciate it. But I'm not Staff Lisa. I'm family. I'm here because Andrew thought it would be good for all of us to live together as a family. She put down the glass she was drying and gave me a long look. Of course you're family, Mabel, but every family member contributes in their own way. Andrew and I work to pay the bills. You help with the house and kids. It's a fair arrangement. I wanted to point out that I had contributed financially as well, that the chunk of money I gave them had significantly reduced their mortgage burden. I wanted to remind her that I had sold my home and given up my independence to be here. But the defensive set of her shoulders told me it would only lead to further conflict. Instead, I simply said, I just want to make sure we all have the same understanding of my role here. Of course we do, she said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Now, would you mind finishing up these dishes? I have an early presentation tomorrow. And with that, she left me alone in the kitchen with a sink full of dishes that weren't mine from a party I had served but not really been part of. The next morning, I tried to talk to Andrew as he rushed to get ready for work. Do you have a minute to chat, honey, about my place here? He glanced at his watch. Can it wait, Mom? I'm running late for a client meeting. It's important, Andrew. I'm feeling like my role here has become confused. He sighed, putting down his briefcase. What do you mean? I feel less like your mother, living with family, and more like household help. Last night, Lisa referred to me as being like a nanny and housekeeper to her friends. Andrew ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that it made my heart ache. She didn't mean anything by that, Mom. You know, Lisa, she sometimes speaks without thinking. But it reflects how things have evolved. I'm happy to help out Andrew, you know that. But I didn't move in to become a full-time babysitter and housekeeper. A flash of irritation crossed his face. We never asked you to be, but we are all making sacrifices to make this arrangement work. Lisa and I both work full-time. The kids have their activities. Everyone needs to contribute. I understand that, I said, trying to keep my voice even. And I do contribute both financially and with my time, but I also need some independence, some recognition that I'm here as family, not as an employee. Andrew looked at his watch again, clearly eager to end the conversation. We can talk about this later, okay? Maybe we all need to sit down and clarify expectations. But that conversation didn't happen. Days passed, then weeks. The tension continued to build with Lisa, increasingly treating me as a subordinate rather than an equal. The requests became demands. The suggestions became instructions. My attempts to establish boundaries were met with comments about gratitude and family duty. The final straw came when I declined to babysit on a Saturday night because I had tickets to a community theater production with friends from my book club. But we've had these dinner plans for weeks. Lisa said, her voice tight with anger. Surely your little play can be rescheduled. I've had these tickets for over a month, I explained, and my friends are expecting me. Your friends? Lisa's laugh held no humor. And what about your family? Don't we come first? The argument escalated quickly, with Lisa eventually storming off and calling a teenage neighbor to babysit instead. Later that evening, I received a text from Andrew. We need to talk when we get home tonight. I sat in my room, heart pounding, knowing something had shifted irrevocably. The comfortable arrangement I had envisioned, the warm family connection I had hoped for, had deteriorated into something unrecognizable. And now, it seemed there would be a reckoning. The house was quiet when Andrew and Lisa returned from their dinner party. The teenage babysitter had been picked up by her parents, and the children were long asleep. I sat in the small sitting area of my basement space, a book open on my lap, but unread, waiting for the conversation I knew was coming. Sure enough, within minutes of their arrival, there was a knock on my door. Andrew stood there, Lisa slightly behind him, her face a careful mask of neutrality. Mom, can we talk? Andrew asked, his voice strained. All three of us. I nodded, gesturing to the small sofa and armchair that constituted my living area. Andrew sat beside me on the sofa while Lisa perched stiffly on the armchair. We need to discuss some things, Andrew began, clearly uncomfortable, about the living arrangement and expectations. I folded my hands in my lap, determined to remain calm despite the anxiety churning in my stomach. I agree. Things haven't been working well lately. Andrew glanced at Lisa, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. The thing is, Mom, when we invited you to live with us, we had certain expectations about how it would work. We thought you'd be more involved in helping with the house and kids. I am involved, I responded, trying to keep the defensive note from my voice. I do laundry, cook several times a week, drive the children to activities, help with homework. But there have been conflicts, Lisa interjected, her voice cool. Times when you've put your personal plans ahead of family needs, like tonight. I had tickets purchased well in advance, I explained, with friends I rarely get to see. And that's fine, Andrew said quickly. You should have a social life, but we need to be able to count on you for the important things, like babysitting whenever you want to go out. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice now. Like being a contributing member of this household, Lisa countered. We gave you a place to live when you had nowhere else to go. The unfairness of this characterization stung like a slap. I had options, Lisa. I could have bought a condo with the money from my house sale, a significant portion of which went to reducing your mortgage. Andrew held up his hands. Let's not argue about who contributed what. The point is, we need to clarify expectations going forward. What expectations exactly? I asked, though a sinking feeling told me I already knew. Lisa leaned forward, her expression determined. If you're going to continue living here, we need more consistent help with the children and the household. That means being available when we need childcare, taking on more of the cooking and cleaning, and generally making yourself more useful. More useful. I repeated the words, bitter on my tongue. So, I am the housekeeper and nanny you described to your friends. That's not fair, Mom, Andrew protested, but his defense lacked conviction. Isn't it? You're essentially asking me to earn my keep through domestic service. Lisa's face hardened. We're asking you to be a responsible adult who contributes meaningfully to the household you live in. Is that so unreasonable? I looked at my son, hoping to see some recognition of the injustice in his eyes, but found only tired resignation. It was then I realized the decision had been made before this conversation even began. This wasn't a negotiation, it was an ultimatum. So what exactly are you saying? I asked quietly. Either I agree to these new terms or… Andrew looked down at his hands. Or we need to reconsider the living arrangement. Maybe it's not working for any of us. There it was, the choice laid bare. Accept a position as unpaid household staff or leave. My own son giving me an ultimatum. A strange calm settled over me in that moment. The fear and anxiety I'd been feeling gave way to a clarity I hadn't experienced in months. I knew what I needed to do, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of an emotional response. I understand, I said simply, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I'll need some time to think about this. They exchanged surprised glances, clearly having expected either immediate acquiescence or an argument. Of course, Andrew said, relief evident in his voice. Take all the time you need. We just wanted to be clear about expectations. You've been very clear, I replied, rising from the sofa to signal the end of the conversation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm rather tired. They left and I sat alone in the silence of my room, the weight of the ultimatum heavy on my shoulders, but my mind unexpectedly, brilliantly clear. I wouldn't cry, I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't agree to become a servant in my son's home. Instead, I would smile, say nothing, and find another way. I just needed a plan. That night, sleep eluded me as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the ultimatum echoing in my mind. The basement, which had never felt quite like home, now felt like a prison cell. But, unlike an actual prison, I had a choice. I could stay and accept their terms, essentially becoming the unpaid help, or I could leave. But where would I go? What would I do at 67 with limited savings remaining after helping Andrew with the house? My options seemed painfully few. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I would not respond directly to their ultimatum. I would neither agree nor refuse. Instead, I would buy myself time while secretly making plans. The quiet dignity of this approach appealed to me. Let them think I was considering their terms while I figured out my escape. That morning at breakfast, I behaved as if nothing had changed, serving pancakes to the children and making small talk with Lisa. If she was surprised by my apparent calm after the previous night's conversation, she didn't show it. Andrew had already left for an early meeting, avoiding the aftermath of the ultimatum he'd delivered. After the morning rush subsided, I retreated to my room with my laptop and began to research my options. Senior apartments in the area were expensive, far beyond what my remaining savings and Social Security could sustain long term. I looked into roommate matching services for seniors, but the thought of moving in with strangers at my age was daunting. Then I remembered Barbara Thompson, my closest friend from my teaching days. We'd lost touch somewhat after her move to Riverside, a small city about 40 miles away 3 years earlier. I found her on Facebook and sent a message explaining that I'd love to catch up. Carefully avoiding any mention of my current situation, I suggested a coffee date halfway between our locations. Barbara responded almost immediately with enthusiasm, and we arranged to meet the following afternoon. I told Lisa I had a doctor's appointment, a small lie that gave me the freedom to leave the house without questions. The coffee shop where we met was in a charming, converted Victorian house with mismatched furniture and the rich aroma of freshly ground beans. Barbara arrived looking much the same as always, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob, her smile warm and genuine as she enveloped me in a hug. "Mabel Johnson, it's been too long," she exclaimed. "You look wonderful." I doubted that was true given the stress of recent months, but I returned her smile and we settled at a corner table with our coffees. At first, we exchanged the usual updates, catching up on mutual acquaintances and sharing photos of grandchildren. Barbara had divorced 10 years earlier and moved to Riverside to be near her daughter. She seemed happy and vibrant, involved in community activities and part-time tutoring work. "And how's life with Andrew and his family?" she finally asked. "Is it everything you hoped?" Something in her perceptive gaze broke through my carefully constructed facade. To my horror, tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. Barbara reached across the table and took my hand. "Oh, my dear, tell me what's wrong." The whole story poured out then, the gradual shift from welcomed family member to tolerated burden, the increasing demands, and finally, the ultimatum. Barbara listened without interruption, her expression moving from concern to outrage. "That's absolutely unacceptable," she said when I finished. "After everything you've done for them, helping with their mortgage, and now they're treating you like an unpaid servant." I dabbed at my eyes with a napkin. "I keep wondering where I went wrong. Did I overstep? Was I too intrusive?" "Stop that right now," Barbara said firmly. "From what you've told me, you've been nothing but considerate and helpful. This isn't about you failing, it's about them taking advantage." Her righteous anger on my behalf was soothing, but it didn't solve my practical problems. "The thing is, I don't know what to do now. I gave them so much of my savings. I can't afford most apartments around here, and I sold most of my furniture when I moved in with them." Barbara was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. "What about Riverside? Cost of living is lower there, and there are some nice senior communities." I shook my head. "Still probably beyond my budget, especially with the need to furnish a new place." "What if there was a job opportunity?" Barbara asked suddenly. "Something that would supplement your income. At my age, who's going to hire me?" A smile spread across Barbara's face. "The community center where I tutor is looking for someone to run their after-school reading program. 20 hours a week, perfect for a retired teacher. The pay isn't amazing, but it would help, and the director is a friend of mine." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. A job. Independence. Purpose. "Do you really think I'd have a chance? Are you kidding?" "With your experience, let me make a call." As Barbara stepped outside to make the call, I felt a strange lightness, as if weights were being lifted from my shoulders, one by one. By the time she returned, her face alight with triumph, I knew my life was about to change direction. "Janet wants to meet you tomorrow if you can make it. She's practically salivating at the thought of having someone with your background." The next steps unfolded with surprising speed. I made another excuse to Lisa about meeting old friends, drove to Riverside, and interviewed with Janet Kelly, the community center director. A warm, no-nonsense woman in her 50s, she offered me the position on the spot. "We can only pay $15 an hour," she apologized, "but the hours are flexible and the children are wonderful." "I'll take it," I said without hesitation. $15 an hour for 20 hours a week wouldn't make me rich, but combined with my Social Security and what remained of my savings, it could make independence possible. With the job secured, I turned my attention to finding a place to live. Barbara suggested I look at Oakwood Apartments, a modest senior complex not far from the community center. "It's not fancy," she warned, "but it's clean, safe, and the residents look out for each other." The one-bedroom apartment I toured that afternoon was indeed basic but bright, with a small patio overlooking a communal garden. The rent, while still a stretch on my new budget, was within the realm of possibility. The manager, upon learning I was a friend of Barbara's, waived the application fee and offered to hold the unit for me with a small deposit. "When would you be looking to move in?" she asked. "As soon as possible," I replied, the plan crystallizing in my mind. "Within the next 2 weeks." The next hurdle was furnishing the apartment. Even a small place needed basics: a bed, sofa, table, and chairs, kitchen essentials. I had kept some personal items and smaller pieces when I sold my house, but they were stored in Andrew's attic and the major furniture pieces were gone. This problem was solved unexpectedly when I mentioned it to Janet during paperwork completion for the job. "We have a community exchange program," she explained. "People donate furniture and household items they no longer need, and others who need them can take what's useful. It's not high-end stuff, but it's functional." That afternoon, Janet showed me the program's storage area, a large room filled with donated furniture and household goods. There, I found a serviceable queen bed frame and nearly new mattress, a small dining set, a comfortable, if slightly worn armchair, and various kitchen necessities. "Take whatever you need," Janet urged. "That's what it's here for." My next call was to my sister Margaret in Arizona. We weren't especially close, but she was the only family I had besides Andrew. I explained the situation as neutrally as possible, not wanting to turn her against her nephew, but needing her to understand why I was making such a dramatic change. "Those ungrateful little—" Margaret didn't finish the sentence, but her indignation was clear. "Of course I'll help, Mabel. How much do you need?" "Just a small loan to cover the security deposit and first month's rent," I assured her. "I'll pay you back once I'm settled and working." "Don't worry about paying it back. Consider it a gift. Frank would be appalled at how they're treating you." With the job-secured apartment reserved, basic furnishings identified, and deposit money arranged, I had everything I needed to make my escape. All that remained was deciding how and when to tell Andrew and Lisa. After careful consideration, I decided I wouldn't tell them until everything was in place. I would continue to be pleasant, but non-committal about their ultimatum, buying time while quietly preparing my exit. Over the next week, I made several trips to Riverside, ostensibly to visit Barbara, but actually to sign the lease arrange, furniture delivery from the community exchange, and continue orientation at the community center. I bought a few basic necessities for the new apartment and had them delivered directly there. I sorted through my possessions in the basement room, quietly packing the most important items when no one was around and storing the boxes in the back of my closet. I contacted a small moving company and scheduled them for the following Tuesday, when I knew both Andrew and Lisa would be at work and the children at school. I arranged for my address change with the Postal Service, updated my bank accounts, and ensured my Social Security payments would go to my new address. Throughout all these preparations, I maintained a calm demeanor at home, going through the motions of daily life. I continued to help with household chores and the children, though I gently began to establish more boundaries, declining some babysitting requests by citing previous commitments. If Lisa noticed this subtle shift, she didn't comment on it, perhaps assuming I was still contemplating their ultimatum. Andrew made a few awkward attempts to check on my decision, but I deflected with vague comments about still thinking it through and weighing my options. His relief at not having to discuss it further was palpable, and he quickly retreated from these conversations. The children, however, were more perceptive. Emma found me packing a box of photographs one afternoon when she came down to my room unexpectedly. "Are you going somewhere, Grandma?" she asked, her small face creased with concern. I sat her down beside me on the bed, choosing my words carefully. I'm just organizing some things, sweetheart. But yes, I will be moving to my own place soon. Why don't you like living with us? I love you and Zach very much, I said, hugging her close. And I'll still see you often. But grandmas need their own space sometimes, just like you like having your own room. She seemed to accept this explanation, though her eyes lingered on the half-packed box. I made her promise not to mention it to her parents yet, explaining that I wanted to surprise them with my decision. It wasn't entirely honest, but it would buy me the time I needed. As the day of my departure drew closer, I wrote a letter to Andrew and Lisa explaining my decision and my new circumstances. I was careful to keep the tone non-accusatory, focusing instead on my need for independence and a space of my own. I thanked them for hosting me and expressed my hope that our relationship would continue to grow, albeit with healthier boundaries. I also made it clear that I would still want to be part of my grandchildren's lives, suggesting regular visits and perhaps occasional weekends with me once I was settled. The night before my planned departure, I sat alone in my room surrounded by the few unpacked items that remained. A strange calm had settled over me. What had begun as a desperate response to an ultimatum had evolved into something empowering, a choice to value myself, to refuse to be diminished, to begin again at an age when many would consider it too late. Frank would have been proud, I thought, running my fingers over our wedding photo, one of the few decorative items I had kept out until the end. He had always encouraged my independence, had never wanted me to shrink myself for others' comfort. "You're a force of nature, Mabel," he used to say with that crooked smile I loved so much. "Never let anyone dim your light. Tomorrow I would reclaim my light. Tomorrow I would walk out with my head high, not as someone being forced to leave, but as someone choosing a better path." They had given me an ultimatum, thinking it left me powerless. Instead, it had set me free. The morning of my departure dawned bright and clear, a perfect October day with just enough crispness in the air to hint at the changing season. It seemed fitting somehow, this day of transition. I had risen early before the rest of the household and prepared a special breakfast for the family, Belgian waffles with fresh berries, a favorite of both children. When Emma and Zach came into the kitchen, still sleepy-eyed in their pajamas, their faces lit up at the sight of the breakfast spread. "Wow, Grandma, what's the occasion?" Zach asked, reaching for a waffle. "Just felt like making something special today," I replied, my voice steady, despite the emotion tightening my throat. Would this be the last breakfast I'd make in this kitchen? Likely so, at least for the foreseeable future. Lisa appeared next, already dressed for work in a tailored suit, her hair perfectly styled. She paused at the sight of the elaborate breakfast, a flicker of suspicion crossing her face. "This looks lovely, Mabel, but I'm running late for a presentation. Just coffee for me," she said, reaching for a travel mug. "Of course," I responded pleasantly. "Good luck with your presentation." She gave me a searching look, perhaps wondering at my unusually cheerful demeanor before hurrying the children to finish their breakfast and get dressed for school. Andrew came down last, also rushing, but pausing long enough to load a plate with waffles. "This is great, Mom. Thanks." I watched him eat quickly, checking emails on his phone between bites. When was the last time we'd actually had a real conversation, not just logistics or polite small talk, but a genuine exchange I couldn't remember, and the realization solidified my resolve. Soon, the morning whirlwind of departure was complete. Lisa left with the children for school, drop-off on her way to work, and Andrew gathered his briefcase for his own commute. "I'll be home late tonight," he told me, pausing at the door. "Client dinner." "Have a good day." I responded, the normalcy of the exchange belying the significance of the moment. This would be the last time I saw my son before everything changed. I had a sudden urge to hug him, to try one more time to bridge the gulf between us, but he was already out the door with a distracted wave. Once the house was empty, I moved with purposeful efficiency. The moving company would arrive at 11, giving me 3 hours to finalize my preparations. I brought down the boxes I'd hidden in my closet, added the last few items, and placed my letter to Andrew and Lisa in an envelope on the kitchen counter, propped against the fruit bowl, where it would be easily noticed. At 10:30, while checking the basement one last time for anything I might have missed, I heard the front door open upstairs. My heart raced, checking my watch. It was too early for any family member to return and too soon for the movers. "Mom," Andrew's voice called down the stairs. "Are you home?" For a brief, cowardly moment, I considered not answering, hiding in the bathroom until he left again. But that wasn't who I was or who I wanted to be. "Down here," I called back quickly, composing myself. His footsteps sounded on the stairs, and then he appeared in the doorway of my room, stopping short at the sight of the packed boxes and stripped bed. What's all this?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. "I'm moving out today," I said simply, meeting his gaze steadily. "I've found a place of my own." His face cycled through confusion, shock, and something that might have been hurt. "Without telling us. Without discussing it." "I left a letter explaining everything," I said, gesturing vaguely upstairs. I didn't want a difficult conversation or tears in front of the children. "So you were just going to disappear while we were all out, just like that?" His voice rose, slightly tinged with anger now. "After everything we've done for you." The unfairness of this statement sparked my own anger, but I kept my voice calm. "Everything you've done for me, Andrew. I gave you a substantial amount of money from the sale of my house. I've been providing free childcare and housekeeping for months, and in return I received an ultimatum to either increase that unpaid labor or leave." He had the grace to look slightly ashamed, but the defensiveness remained. "We just asked you to contribute more to the household. That's not unreasonable." "No, you asked me to become Lisa's domestic servant. There's a difference." I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to soften. "Look, I don't want to argue. I found a place that suits me better and a part-time job that I'm excited about. This is for the best for all of us." Where are you going?" "Riverside. I'll be working at the community center there, running their after-school reading program." His eyebrows shot up. "Riverside? That's an hour away in traffic, and you found a job. When did all this happen?" "I've been planning for the past week, ever since you and Lisa presented me with your expectations." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration so like his father that it made my heart ache despite everything. "I don't understand why you didn't just tell us you were unhappy with the arrangement. We could have discussed it." "We did discuss it, Andrew. Multiple times. You weren't listening." I moved toward him, placing a hand on his arm. "This isn't about punishment or anger. It's about me needing to reclaim my independence, to live on my terms." He looked at my hand, then at the boxes surrounding us. "Does this have to happen today, right now? Can't we at least talk about it as a family?" "The movers will be here in half an hour. My apartment is ready. My job starts Monday." I squeezed his arm gently. "But this isn't goodbye forever. I've left my new address and phone number in the letter. I still want to be part of your lives, especially the children's, just on different terms." Andrew's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it absently, then with more focus. "It's Lisa. She's coming home. Apparently Emma got upset at school and told her teacher you were leaving today. The school called Lisa." I closed my eyes briefly. Poor Emma. I should have known she might say something, despite our pinky promise. "I'm sorry about that. I didn't want to upset the children." "What did you think would happen?" Andrew's voice was sharp now. "That they wouldn't be upset by their grandmother suddenly disappearing." Before I could respond, the sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house, followed by rapid footsteps on the stairs. Lisa appeared beside Andrew, her face flushed with anger. "What the hell is going on?" she demanded, looking from Andrew to me, taking in the packed boxes. "Emma's teacher called to say she was crying at school because her grandmother is moving away today without even saying goodbye." "I was going to call once I was settled," I began, but Lisa cut me off. "So, it's true. You're actually leaving just like that?" "Yes," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I've found my own place and a job. It's all explained in the letter I left upstairs." "A letter? You were going to leave a letter and sneak away while we were all gone?" Lisa's voice rose incredulously. "After everything we've done for you." There it was again, that phrase that ignited something fierce inside me. "Everything you've done for me." Let's be clear about what actually happened here. I sold my home and gave you a significant sum to reduce your mortgage. I've provided free childcare, cooking, and housekeeping for months, and in return I was given an ultimatum to either increase that unpaid work or get out. Lisa's face reddened. "That's not fair. We just asked you to contribute more to the family." "No, you asked me to serve you. There's a difference." I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. "Look, This isn't how I wanted this to go. I had hoped to be gone before anyone got home to spare us all this scene. To spare yourself, you mean? Lisa snapped. God forbid you actually have to face the consequences of your actions. Lisa, Andrew said quietly, placing a restraining hand on her arm. She shook him off. No, Andrew. Your mother has been planning this betrayal for who knows how long, was going to sneak away without even saying goodbye to her grandchildren, and you're defending her. I'm not defending anyone. I just think we all need to calm down. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. My movers right on time. That's for me, I said, moving toward the stairs. My moving company. Perfect timing, Lisa muttered sarcastically. I brushed past them both, climbing the stairs with as much dignity as I could muster. This was not how I had envisioned this moment, but perhaps it was better this way. Everything in the open, no more secrets or pretense. The next hour passed in a blur of activity and strained silence. The movers efficiently loaded my few boxes and pieces of furniture into their small truck. Andrew hovered nearby, occasionally asking if I needed help with something, while Lisa stood with arms crossed, watching the proceedings with barely concealed anger. When the truck was loaded, I did a final sweep of the basement room that had been my home for the past year. It looked surprisingly empty now, stripped of the personal touches that had made it mine. Just a blank slate again, ready for the next occupant, whoever that might be. Upstairs, I found my letter still on the kitchen counter unopened. I picked it up and handed it to Andrew. Please read this when you have a moment. It explains everything better than I can right now. He took it wordlessly, slipping it into his pocket. I should go, I said, looking from Andrew to Lisa. The movers are waiting. That's it then, Lisa asked, her voice tight. You're just walking out. I'm not just walking out. I'm moving to my own place, starting my own life again. There's a difference. What about the children? What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them the truth. That Grandma has her own place now, but she still loves them very much and will see them soon. Tell them they can visit me in Riverside. I have a guest bedroom. Riverside? Andrew repeated as if the word itself was painful. An hour away. It's not that far, I said gently, and it's where I need to be right now. The front door opened again, and we all turned to see Zach and Emma being dropped off by a neighbor. School had let out early, I realized with a jolt. Of course, it was a teacher development day. How could I have forgotten Emma spotted me first and ran forward, throwing her arms around my waist. Grandma, you're still here. I knelt down to her level, holding her small shoulders. Yes, sweetheart. I wanted to say goodbye properly. So you are leaving? Zach asked, his young face serious beyond his years. Like forever. Not forever, I assured him. Just moving to my own place, and you can visit me there, it's not far. But why can't you stay here with us? Emma's lower lip trembled dangerously. I glanced up at Andrew and Lisa, silently asking how much the children already knew or should be told. Andrew gave a small shrug, leaving it to my judgment. Sometimes adults need their own space, I explained carefully. Just like you need your own room, but that doesn't change how much we love each other. Will we still see you for Christmas? Zach asked practically. Of course, and before that too. I'm thinking maybe you could come stay with me some weekend soon once I'm all settled. This suggestion brightened both their faces, and I felt a wave of relief. The children at least might adapt to this change more easily than their parents. I hugged them both tightly, breathing in the scent of their hair, memorizing the feel of their small bodies against mine. I have to go now. The moving men are waiting, but I'll call you very soon, okay? They nodded solemnly, and I stood up facing Andrew and Lisa one last time. I've left my new address and phone number in the letter. Please call once you've had some time to process everything. Andrew stepped forward awkwardly. Drive safely. It wasn't forgiveness or understanding, but it was something. A small acknowledgement that despite everything, he still cared about my well-being. I nodded, then turned and walked out the front door down the path to where my car was parked at the curb behind the small moving truck. The driver gave me a questioning look, and I nodded, indicating I was ready to leave. As I slid into the driver's seat of my car, I caught sight of the family in my rearview mirror. Andrew and Lisa standing on the porch with the children between them watching me go. A perfect family portrait except for the palpable tension visible even from a distance. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb, following the moving truck. As I reached the corner, I allowed myself one last glance in the rearview mirror. Andrew had his arm around Emma, who was waving. I waved back, a lump in my throat, then turned the corner and drove toward my new life. The apartment in Riverside was as modest as I remembered, but bathed in afternoon sunlight, it looked welcoming. The community exchange furniture had been delivered the previous day, arranged by Barbara according to the rough floor plan I'd sketched. It wasn't perfectly coordinated or new, but it was functional and surprisingly homey. The movers unloaded my boxes efficiently, placing them in the rooms I indicated. Within an hour, they were gone, leaving me alone in my new space. The silence was profound after the emotional tumult of the morning. I sat on the edge of the secondhand sofa, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I'd done. At 67, I had walked away from the security of my son's home, from daily contact with my grandchildren, from the known to the unknown. Was it bravery or foolishness? Time would tell. A knock at the door roused me from these thoughts. I opened it to find Barbara standing there with a potted plant and a bottle of wine. "Housewarming gifts," she announced, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "How did it go?" "Not as smoothly as I'd hoped," I admitted, recounting the confrontation with Andrew and Lisa. "But it's done now." Barbara nodded, setting the plant on the windowsill where it would catch the morning light. "It was never going to be easy, Mabel. But you did the right thing." "Did I?" I asked, suddenly unsure. Maybe I should have tried harder to make it work. "After they gave you that ultimatum, no way." Barbara opened the wine and found 2 mugs in one of my kitchen boxes, since the proper glasses were still packed away. "You deserve better than being treated like an unpaid servant. They needed to learn that they can't take advantage of you." She handed me a mug of wine and raised her own in a toast. "To new beginnings, to standing up for yourself, to Mabel Johnson, force of nature." I couldn't help but smile at the echo of Frank's words. "Force of nature," I repeated softly. "I'm not sure about that. Right now I feel more like a leaf blown by the wind." "Give it time," Barbara said confidently. "You'll find your footing, and in the meantime, you're not alone." We spent the evening unpacking essential items and ordering takeout Chinese food that we ate cross-legged on the floor, laughing like college students. By the time Barbara left, promising to return in the morning to help with more unpacking, I felt more settled, more certain of my decision. That night, in my new bedroom with unfamiliar shadows on the walls, I thought of Andrew and the children, wondering if they were thinking of me too. Had they read my letter? Were they angry? Sad, relieved, but for the first time in months, I also thought about myself, about what I wanted and needed. This small apartment with its mismatched furniture was mine. The decisions about how to live here would be mine alone. The job waiting for me on Monday was one I had chosen, one that would use my skills and experience in a meaningful way. As I drifted off to sleep, Frank's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, "You're a force of nature, Mabel. Never let anyone dim your light." Maybe, just maybe, my light was beginning to shine again. 6 months passed more quickly than I could have imagined. My small apartment had transformed from a space filled with unfamiliar secondhand furniture into a true home, decorated with treasured photos, bright throw pillows, and the growing collection of children's artwork sent by Emma and Zach. The balcony now boasted container gardens with herbs and flowers, a small oasis where I enjoyed my morning coffee. My work at the community center had blossomed beyond the initial after-school reading program. Janet had quickly recognized my experience and enthusiasm, expanding my role to include adult literacy classes 2 evenings a week and a Saturday morning storytelling hour for the youngest community members. The additional hours stretched my energy sometimes, but the work nourished my soul in a way I hadn't experienced since retirement. The relationship with Andrew and his family had evolved too, though not without challenges. Those first few weeks after my departure had been difficult. Andrew had called 3 days after I left, his voice strained as he asked practical questions about mail forwarding and whether I needed anything from the house. The conversation was polite, but distant, neither of us addressing the emotional elephant in the room. Lisa had remained silent for nearly a month before finally calling her apology, stilted but seemingly sincere. "I never meant to make you feel unwelcome," she said. "I think we all just had different expectations about the arrangement." It was a start, if not the full acknowledgement I might have hoped for, but I was learning to accept what was offered and let go of what wasn't. The children had adjusted better than anyone. After the initial confusion and upset, they had embraced the concept of having a grandmother with her own special place to visit. They had come for their first overnight weekend about a month after I moved, excited by the adventure of it. I had prepared the guest room with special touches, new character pillowcases for each of them, a small shelf of books and games. That first visit had set the pattern for monthly weekend stays that all of us looked forward to. Andrew would drop them off, usually staying for a cup of coffee and increasingly relaxed conversation before heading back to the city. Lisa occasionally came along, though she often used the free time for her own activities. Our interactions remained cordial, if not warm, a truce of sorts that seemed to be working for everyone. One unexpected development in my new life was Frank Patterson, a 72-year-old retired high school English teacher who volunteered at the community center twice a week. Our friendship had begun over shared lesson plans and book recommendations, gradually evolving into lunch dates and eventually dinner at my apartment, where I discovered he was an accomplished amateur chef. Frank was different from my late husband in many ways, quieter and more introspective with a dry wit that caught me by surprise. But they shared a fundamental kindness and respect that I had come to realize was non-negotiable in my life now. Frank never questioned my decisions or suggested I should be different than I was. His interest in my thoughts and experiences felt genuine and reciprocal. We were taking things slowly, both of us carrying the wisdom and caution that comes with age and experience. But his presence in my life added a richness I hadn't expected to find again at 67. The true test of all these evolving relationships came with Thanksgiving. Traditionally, we had always gathered at Andrew and Lisa's home, but this year, I suggested hosting at my apartment. It would be tight with 7 of us. Andrew's family of 4, Barbara, Frank, and myself, but I wanted them to see my life here to understand that this wasn't a temporary situation or a lesser existence. To my surprise, Lisa was the first to accept the invitation. "That sounds lovely, Mabel. Can I bring anything?" We planned the menu together over several phone calls, finding a comfortable collaboration that had eluded us when living under the same roof. She would bring her famous sweet potato casserole and a pumpkin pie. I would handle the turkey and traditional sides. Andrew offered to bring wine and manage the children's entertainment. The day arrived bright and clear, my small apartment filled with the aromas of roasting turkey and baking bread. Barbara came early to help with final preparations, and Frank arrived shortly after with a beautiful flower arrangement and his signature cranberry relish. When Andrew's car pulled up outside, I felt a flutter of nervousness. This would be the first time they had seen my apartment, my new life, in its entirety. Would they see it as I did, as a place of independence and joy? Or would they view it with pity as a step down from what I had left behind? Emma burst through the door first, brandishing a handmade card. "Grandma, your house looks so pretty." Zach followed, more reserved at 12, but still offering a warm hug. "Cool place, Grandma. I like all the books." And then Andrew and Lisa bearing food and gifts, their eyes taking in the small but cheerful space I had created. I watched Lisa's face, carefully remembering her larger home with its designer touches and perfect coordination. "You've made it so homey," she said, and I was surprised to detect genuine admiration in her voice. "It feels like you." Andrew nodded agreement, moving to the wall where I had hung family photos, including several recent ones of the children. "You've got a good eye for making a space feel warm." The tension I had been holding eased slightly. They were seeing it the life I had built, not with pity, but with something approaching respect. Dinner went more smoothly than I could have hoped. The food was delicious, the conversation easy as it flowed around topics from the children's school activities to community center stories to Frank's humorous tales of his early teaching disasters. Lisa even shared some frustrations with her job, something she had rarely done in my presence before. After dessert, as we all sat comfortably with coffee or tea, Andrew cleared his throat. "Mom, I've been wanting to say something for a while now." He glanced at Lisa, who nodded encouragement. "I owe you an apology, a real one, not just for form's sake." The room grew quiet, even the children sensing the importance of the moment. "When you lived with us," he continued, "I didn't see what was happening, or maybe I didn't want to see it. I let you be treated like an employee rather than my mother, and when you tried to talk to me about it, I brushed you off. Andrew, you don't have to. I began, uncomfortable with the raw emotion in his voice. No, I do. What we did that ultimatum, it was wrong, and even though I can see now that you're happier here, that doesn't excuse how we handled things. Lisa reached over and took his hand, then looked at me. We both owe you that apology, Mabel. I was so caught up in what I thought our arrangement should be that I stopped seeing you as a person with needs and feelings of your own. I'm truly sorry. The sincerity in their voices brought tears to my eyes. This was what I had needed all along, not their pity or even their approval, but their recognition of my humanity, my right to dignity and choice. Thank you, I said simply. That means a great deal to me. Are you crying, Grandma? Emma asked, her own eyes wide with concern. I laughed, wiping away a stray tear. Just a little, sweetheart. Sometimes adults cry when they're happy too. Like when Mommy cried at my piano recital, she asked innocently. Exactly like that, Lisa confirmed with a smile. The moment passed, the conversation shifting to lighter topics, but something fundamental had changed. A weight had been lifted, a door opened to a new kind of relationship with my son and his family, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation or role expectations. Later, after they had gone and Frank had helped with the last of the cleanup, I stood on my small balcony, looking at the night sky. The past 6 months had been a journey I never expected to take at this stage of life. From the security of family that turned into a cage to the uncertainty of independence that had become a garden where I could grow again. The ultimatum that had seemed so cruel at the time had actually been a gift in disguise, forcing me to reclaim parts of myself I had almost forgotten existed. The teacher, the friend, the woman with her own dreams and desires, separate from her role as mother and grandmother. Even perhaps the possibility of new love. None of it had been easy. There had been nights of doubt, of loneliness, of wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. Financial concerns that kept me awake, physical limitations that reminded me of my age, moments of missing the daily presence of my grandchildren so acutely it felt like physical pain. But through it all, there had been a growing certainty that I had made the right choice, that at 67, it wasn't too late to stand up for myself, to demand respect, to build something new. As I looked up at the stars, I thought of what I would tell other women my age facing similar crossroads, that it's never too late to begin again, that your value doesn't diminish with age or change of circumstance, that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful destinations. I thought of that morning 6 months ago when I had smiled at my son's ultimatum, said nothing, and quietly planned my escape. He had no idea then what his demand would set in motion. Neither had I, really. But standing here now in the fullness of a life reclaimed, I was profoundly grateful for the journey. Thank you, I whispered to the night sky, to Frank, to Barbara, to the community center, children who brightened my days, to Andrew and Lisa for their belated but sincere understanding, to my grandchildren for their uncomplicated love, and, most of all, to myself for finding the courage to begin again. If you've ever faced a situation where you had to choose between your dignity and the easier path, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Was there a moment in your life when standing up for yourself changed everything? Please, like this video if my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need encouragement to make a difficult but necessary change. Remember, it's never too late to rewrite your story. Thank you for listening, and until next time, be kind to yourself along the journey.